personally authorized by you. The board of directors will crucify you.
Welcome back, guys, to this, our episode 10 of the Matrix of Mendacity Masterclass. This is a big milestone, even if it is just 10 episodes. It has been a very fun project. And so let me go ahead and just pull up my co-host, Juxtaposition. Welcome.
Hello, Josh. How are you today?
I'm doing great. What do you think? We've made it through 10 episodes. Time goes by fast.
It does. Yeah. It's great. 10 is a good number.
It is. Today we have decided to title the episode The Usual Suspects, because that's really what it is at the end of all of these things that we look into. And I hope the audience has seen, at least some of the previous episodes that we have done, because if you have seen those, then you should absolutely understand why we chose that title, because the same names pop up over and over again. That they moved them into the same houses. They live in the same neighborhoods. They all went to the same schools or the same Catholic retreat, or they all have the same banker. And it is a very small world. And that's what you discover. And so I hope people had a chance to see the pregame that Juxtaposition did. I streamed that last night for people to check out, and I commented on it and got some good feedback. And so we're going to kind of jump off of that and talk about some of the different cases that seem to be individuals and not connected. And we're going to show you by the end of this episode that they're all connected in one way or another. So why don't you go ahead and just kind of get us started on the usual suspects?
Okay. Well, my promo video that I did yesterday, The Usual Suspects, to prep us for today's more insightful, more deeper dive into the concept of using crisis actors and murderers and bankers, because they all go together. You can't really conduct any kind of a assassination of a political person or a strategic operative within the military unless you have bank support and you need a thumbs up from Geneva, Switzerland, or the authority, because it's be banking for the money and to pay, for transportation, lodging, food allowances. You need a bank someone's got to pay bills, and to get the weapons and the ammo. you got to practice and rehearse before the hit, and then that's handled with a series of financial people. Then you had the military aspect, which is, who, what, where, when, and who's going to provide the transportation to and from, so that you clean up, change your clothes, leave your weapons with a disposal person, and then disappear at an airport, and you're flown away to some other zip code. This is pretty standard. You fly people in weeks in advance so that they have time to reconnoiter and familiarize themselves with the killing box, the kill zone, and then they rehearse in a house that's a doppelganger twin or something pretty similar at the same time of day that the killing is to happen, or night. And they may have logistical support staff they'll be coordinating with earpieces that'll have, infrared, telescopic, so that night is day. You'll have drone support, satellite support, and reconnaissance houses on the perimeter. So it's really just like shooting, fish in a barrel situation. So you're familiar with the Aaron Valente case. So that was the one that I featured last night first. Then I pivoted to the Sharon Tate and Abigail Folger Lino LaBianca murders back in 1969. And because a lot of folks in my age group are familiar with that case. And they're extremely similar. There are many, many similarities. You could say the same for Zodiac, and you could say the same for Son of Sam, and you could say the same for, People's Temple and what became retitled in the media as Jonestown. There never was a Jonestown. There was People's Temple Agricultural Project on Union Carbide property in British intelligence Guyana. So no matter how you slice Jim Jones, you're going to come up military intelligence, British intelligence, Union Carbide, NATO. So the thing is that if you did have a church and you were able to move everyone down there, which is going to cost a lot of money, have an expensive pharmacy, and have paramilitary guards with AR-15 rifles walking around the perimeter of your property, you're going to need cash flow, and it would have to be done in the jungle, 100 kilometers, 60 miles away from the capital, Georgetown. So you're going to need a bank, you're going to need a pharmaceutical rep, and you're going to need military security clearances, real ID to get in and out of that facility. You certainly can't walk, so you're going to need a helicopter or a boat. So really the only two ways to get out of there is small airplane, helicopter, or boat. Those are kind of your choices.
And just real quick, so to preface, usually all of these have vested interests by different parties. And so when you have a lot of money at stake, and that's the key, whenever there's a lot of money at stake, people are willing to use that money to pay for things to be taken care of, but they want them taken care of. And so that's the reason that there is so much preparation, rehearsal, making sure that things will be done right. And, that's just how it works in military strategy. You practice and you practice and you practice, and then you execute it, and things are done generally very well, and they pay for that. That is what they're paying for.
Well, yeah, Josh, we call it being professional. But if you want to be successful, okay, let's say professional means you're going to get paid. You're going to be paid to do a job. And you want to make sure you're successful at executing your duties and making sure your job is done properly, no mistakes. Or if you have a mistake, you correct it in field, it gets fixed. So you have a backup plan in case plan A doesn't work, you use plan B. That doesn't work, you use plan C. But by all plan A, B, and C, all bases covered, that's what ABC means. It means that you are a professional and you have all bases covered. That is why I'm going to pay you this much in advance and this much on completion. That's how it works. I will pay you in advance because you come well recommended and we know you're competent. And then when you show the results that we asked you for, that we contracted you for, then you get your last and final payment. And then, you're dismissed until, and we may use you again since you're so professional, right? But you can also be professional even if you're an amateur and you're not getting paid. I mean, if you race motorcycles or bicycles, or you play tennis and you're not sponsored by Nike or some big corporation, you can still, be competitive. And of course, everybody wants to win. If you're athletic, you generally are motivated by victories. Now, the irony is, in order to be victorious, you need to be defeated thousands of times, hundreds and hundreds of defeats. So if you don't have a personality that can handle being defeated, you'll never be professional and you'll never be successful. You do know that the most professionally successful people are the biggest losers. That's a L for loser. But you see, they develop so much knowledge of how things work out in the field. And you should know that this drives people to be very prepared, to rehearse and practice, so that they don't make any mistakes in the field. Or when the situation is like a chessboard and it's moving, there are things that happen that could cause your demise or your defeat. And you need to go through that simulation of defeat in order to understand, is there something you could have done differently? Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes the circumstances are overwhelming, and it doesn't matter how much preparation you have. Luck is an element. Good luck or bad luck can happen. And so what I'm saying is that anyone who gets to a high level, whether they're amateur or whether they're being paid as a professional, goes through a lot of trial and error, practice and rehearsal. And no one gets to the high level without having gone through the process of losing and making mistakes. That's a given.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And while you were saying that, what came to mind, gladiators, and hence the name Gladio, the whole setup, we call them Gladio operations because of Operation Gladio, which was had a lot of different things, but generally the idea was to stir up tension and cover up murders that were being done kind of on this contract basis, and to control the whole what's the word, control the environment on different levels. And so that's how these are presented one way to the public with a narrative and a storyline, but that storyline serves to cover up what was actually going on behind the scenes by people who have perfected their respective trade, or gladiators by all means.
Gladio began with the army left behind. In other words, there was some kind of a war or a conflict, and then it ended, and then the main forces were pulled out, leaving behind a clandestine, ununiformed civilian, looking like a civilian. But they are also military soldiers, but they don't wear uniforms. They wear civilian clothes. And so when we say that the enemy is withdrawing, like in Vietnam, we're going to withdraw, or that's not true. The NATO never withdraws, ever. There's never a withdrawal. There's the illusion of it, but they're going to leave behind secured hamlets. They're going to leave behind their maps of all their minefields. They have a mapping of where they lay their bombs, their undetonated munitions, and they're going to maintain that for years and years and years. They never leave. And guess what? They're going to select the mayor and your city council of your secured district. And if you don't like that, or if you have a kind of a disobedient mayor, then Gladio will kidnap him and murder him at night secretly when no one is aware of it, when everyone's sleeping. And then you wake up in the morning, he's hanging from a tree in your city park. So that's Gladio.
Mm-hmm.
They come into your neighborhood, but they're already in your neighborhood. They may bring in the killer. The killer may be brought in, but the homes, the safe houses, the
Assets,
murder scenes, they exist now in everyone's neighborhood everywhere. There's kill boxes and safe houses. That's like a standard thing in every town and city.
It's an infrastructure that's set up across various, maybe they have assets in police, or they have assets in the security gate company. And we're going to get into that because they do actually, seemingly they all go with the same security company to secure their properties. And people wonder how they just mysteriously end up in these houses, and people just die and they don't, how they get in? We had a gate.
Can we hit the pause button for just a second here?
We don't have a pause button, but
okay. Well, I'll be right back.
That's fine. I can hold the show down.
Thanks. Okay. I'm back. Oh, now I'm on the other side. Okay. Gotcha. For you.
There we go. Yeah, so we're going to discuss how all of these are kind of managed in such a way that they always have access to certain infrastructure almost in a programmatical way. That's what comes to mind. It's kind of like they have a program that can be executed in a different area called localization process. So they can localize the operation if they need to do it in Rome, if they need to do it in California, if they need to do it in Idaho, if they need to do it in Ohio, they can get it done because they have infrastructure in place and access to specific assets. Some are former military, some are not. Some are in police, some are not. It's just set up and embedded in such a strategic, well planned, well thought out way that this can be done very easily, it seems. Is
Yeah,
it?
like the media, the newspaper reporters or the buffoons you see on television news, who are complete buffoons. You should have no respect for your law enforcement. You should have no respect for your judges. You have no respect for anyone in the media business, especially the weather meteorologist people. I mean, they're really a disgrace. But they're all disgraceful. Anyway, they're all compromised. And so in every town, it's very easy to carry out Gladio murders or terrorism attacks because you see the police are in on it. When I say the police are in on it, they may not participate in it, but they're certainly most definitely not going to investigate or arrest anyone. That is not their purpose. In the words of a Santa Barbara sheriff's deputy, to me, when I approached him about reporting a crime, he put his hand out to like push me away and said to me, "I am not here for you." Well, those words resonated with me because it's true. Your sheriff is not there for you. They're there to get a paycheck and to go through their quote. They have a quota that they have to sign. They have to fill out so many incident reports per day. Otherwise, their boss is going to think they're goofing off, which I'm here to tell you, they do goof off. They goof off a lot because I ride bicycles and I see they park in little secret places.
Oh, yeah.
And they're looking at their phone, playing video games or whatever they're doing. But they're most definitely not performing any policing. They're not on a stakeout. They're not on a stakeout. They're in the middle of a wine vineyard. They're not on a stakeout.
In terms of what you said, for instance, they might not be aware that they're participating, but all it takes is one or maybe two people in that department to just shut the whole thing down. That's all they need.
Well, the sergeants or lieutenants, and it's military. Your sheriff and your police are 100% military operation. That's why they use titles like sergeant and lieutenant and captain. Why are they doing that if it's not a military operation? They run under maritime law. You follow the orders of the captain. It's just that simple. So the guys at the bottom, they're fairly powerless and they know it, and they will get in trouble. They will get in trouble if they all of a sudden decided to become Lieutenant Columbo or Inspector Clouseau. They are not Joe and Frank Hardy of the Hardy Boys. They don't hire your patrol officer to go investigate potential homicides or terrorist events. They're not paid to do that. And they're specifically told, you do your drunk driving and your speeding. That's called policing. And then you clock out and go get a deli sandwich and then smile and be polite to the people in the store. So everybody thinks that you're a nice cop. But the whole time that you're out on the street, you're either pulling people over for speeding or you're trying to, you're bored out of your mind. You're bored out of your mind.
And yeah, and as I was going to say, for instance, you notice that people find so you go in with good intentions to like be a cop or something, and then you stick around long enough and you say, wait, this whole justice system is just fraud, and the people that are really bad keep coming back out, and the people who really didn't do anything, they just milk those people for money. And so then the people who stay after knowing that either say, well, it's all kind of fake, so why don't I just make a little bit of money on the side, or the good people don't last. They just leave because either they have a conscience and they're not going to do that, or they end up becoming slowly corrupted over time. And
well, let's be honest, they're not recruiting from the brightest bulbs, first of all. If you want to be a sheriff's deputy, you're probably a C or a D student in high school. You really are. You're not going to hire any A and B students. That's not who becomes cops. You look at it, they can't spell. They don't know how to communicate. They're texting on their phones. They're like a TikTok generation of retards.
That
So
is bullying.
that they go over their center line too. They text on their phone and go over. Have you ever seen a sheriff's car go over the center line because the driver was texting? Happens all the time. And that is who it has a 9mm Beretta, an electronic stun gun, mace, an AR-15 with ammo in the trunk of the car. And he's got mace, a radio, drone support, helicopter support. This knucklehead
Infusion center
have a whistle and a radio and not even a water pistol because they don't even know how to drive their car and stay in their lane. And they're a D student in high school. So these are not your college graduates. These are people who are, where are they going to go? I mean, this is a pretty good job. You get to carry a gun, bully people, act like a tough guy because you got all these weapons, and then get respect because of your badge. But if you got any other job, you would be treated like, hey, you got to work your ass off to prove yourself, right? Yeah. But when you're a sheriff's deputy or a policeman, you don't have to work your ass off. You're not there for the public. You're there for your superior. And to please your superior and the district attorney's office, you need to generate incident reports and make arrests and book people into the jail. That's it. That's the job.
Real quick, I'm going to go over this topic of fusion centers. The idea of a fusion center is you've probably seen, on documentaries or something, they show you these huge tech brain centers, and that's what a fusion center is. They plug in local law enforcement into basically the whole grid through these fusion centers. And so
just localized intel for your town.
Yes, localization.
Military intelligence at the edge of your town. Typically, they put them kind of on the edge of the city limit.
Well, remember, I said earlier, they're able to localize this program to be run anywhere, and this is that localization process. I'll read here, local sheriff's departments and municipal police departments whose organizational structures already mimic military operations operate through dedicated fusion unit departments housed within their intelligence divisions. They're explicitly integrated into NATO, confirming their status not as civilian protectors, but as military extensions. Next one says, Fusion mandates the seamless sharing of data, including driver's license and criminal records between the CIA, FBI, Mossad, MI6, MI5, KGB, amongst others. And it acts a few different roles.
When we say that, I want people to understand when we talk about CIA or FBI, you do know that those agencies, which includes the police department, they subcontract to consulting firms that you may have never heard of before. Mm-hmm. And so you're talking about corporate contractors are doing most of the heavy lifting on this. That law enforcement and CIA people, there's only a very few number of them involved. And the boots on the ground are going to be crisis actors or work for corporations to back up the police. They'll send the police in to knock on the doors, but there's a whole infrastructure behind the police that do not work for the police.
Mm-hmm. And you're right.
But a private corporation.
That's important to mention. Absolutely. This whole idea of data repository, the massive convergence of surveillance data is typically warehoused underground in installations like the NATO Military Intelligence Data Center located in Salt Lake City, Utah, a location chillingly categorized as District 12 of the Hunger Games in the United States. The term soft files, a great way to hide all of this information on the public is to hide it right out in the open. And so you have Facebook and you have all of these social media sites where people willingly share all of their information, and they don't even have to have it ready to be subpoenaed because it's all out in the open. That's the soft files. And as you have said, which I'm glad you did, an ocean of gray space contractors, people who are nobody knows about at all. They don't know these people
Right.
exist.
That they're the ones operating between the gray and black latitudes, the private corporations. It was what Ronald Reagan was referring to when he said we need to privatize the federal government, to outsource everything because the private industry is so much more efficient. Of course, that was poppycock and balderdash because this privatizing means secret. Okay. So you just take it from people who don't care about their jobs because they're locked into a fixed salary. Then you move it to a private corporation that's going to report to Lockheed Martin. I mean, eventually, Lockheed Martin is the supervisor of all technical surveillance worldwide for the whole globe. And they get paid better. They have higher paying jobs. There's more career opportunity. Maybe someday you could get John Ramsey's job, executive vice president at Lockheed. Now you can make 10 million a year, maybe, maybe more. Or maybe you could get a job at Kleiner Perkins or Sequoia Capital. These banks deal in surveillance information also because they have to fund operations. I can assure you that no policeman, no sheriff's deputy is ever going to make any management decisions about what to do with the data that's collected. That's going to be done in a pyramid hierarchy of people who are experienced in the spy, surveillance, spook business. They're going to decide whether to push a button. Then, if they need a button to be pushed by the police, they'll dispatch a directive, an order, and that'll go down the chain of command. And then some new guy will go ring your doorbell. Or typically what police do is they pound on your door. If you notice, they usually are not polite. They pound on your door. I'm not really sure, how effective that is. If anything, that's going to make people want to arm themselves and blast through their door.
Yeah, and
But
the whole thing is compartmentalized very well, in such a way that really no one part is able to piece the whole thing together. And it's in doing that the whole thing is able to work so well because it may look like, for instance, we may look at somebody and it looks like they are they know, or like they're in on this quote unquote conspiracy, but
right.
that may be halfway true in that they are following an order they were given, but they don't have the big picture. And that's
No.
why this thing works well.
The police are toothless German shepherds. They have no teeth. So when you're a toothless dog, you kind of it's hard to gnaw on the bones because it's gum. You might expose your jawbone. So the cops have no authority and they can't make any decisions and they don't decide who to investigate. So the problem is the police become disengaged emotionally because they just want to get their paycheck and get a retirement. They want their pension. And that's, as they get older, all they care about is when they're like looking at the calendar, when they're going to retire and how much money per month they're going to get. I know because I trained and rode bicycles with a lot of active sheriff's deputies, and all they talked about is, I only got another 36 months and bam, I'm out of here. Bam, I'm out of here. And they're just talking about exiting their job because they hated their job. And that's who's out there. That's the senior people. They hate their job. So, but they are looking at maybe going into the private sector in the reconnaissance business, when they finish up as a county sheriff, then maybe they can go be a consultant, right?
The whole thing that you said reminded me, you're right. When you're in, no matter who it is, when you're in that career and you see the things you see, just God knows the just worst things you would never want to see. I genuinely, it almost devalues human life, and so you start to almost have this hate for people because you see what evil there is out there. That's very hard to.
Also, when you're wearing a NATO flak jacket and you're carrying a loaded with 14 bullets, 13 bullets in the clip and one in the chamber, 9mm Beretta pistol, and you have stun guns and mace, a radio, you are a menacing, frightening figure walking around the town or driving around with your tank of a car,
They've gotten bigger too.
your SUV think tank.
Mm-hmm.
And then if someone flips you off or curses at you, they get pissed. They get pissed off. But I mean, why are you surprised? I mean, you're asking for it. You're asking for it. Nobody wants you here. Nobody wants to have an armed soldier, a NATO soldier, under the guise that the sheriff or a police officer when they're not. They're a NATO bot. The only thing missing is the blue helmet. Just give them a blue helmet, and then you see that they're NATO peacekeeper, right? But they're there to cause trouble. All they do is they escalate everything.
And they have.
If you want to keep things calm, keep the police out of your neighborhood.
They have been absolutely over, let's say, the last 50 years, longer than I've been here, but they have increasingly started wearing black, all black, more armor, more weapons. The cars have gotten bigger. You notice they don't actually have cars anymore. They're all SUVs, and those are getting bigger. Yeah, and so there is absolutely no question about that.
They're fully militarized.
Yeah.
Like they're expecting an invasion of 1,000, enemy, which of course they're not. The enemy is the citizens, the citizenry. That's called policing. Well, you know what I call it? I call it prison guarding. They're guarding the prison.
Mm-hmm. Well,
now we've integrated all this electronic surveillance, ring cameras, smart meters, LED streetlights, light emitting diodes, drones, continuous airplanes and drones overhead in my area. So it's just overkill. I mean, we're like at war every day, 16 hours a day minimum of continuous military surveillance going on.
And then you go and you look at what's going on in Minnesota, and it looks like they're not even trying to help the people who live there. Somebody has ordered them to stand down. Who's given that order?
NATO, Geneva, the people who run the show.
Yeah.
And then they have a local director. There's a director and a producer in field, probably in an RV, or at the fusion center. They've got a fusion center in Minneapolis. So they're probably in a nice, warm, cozy office with their computer screens. And then they have a radio, and they're talking to the sergeants that are ordering the troops at the perimeter. And then, they have their directives and they do whatever they do. And
so in your video, the one you made yesterday, the pregame, and I did see portions of the couple of the other ones before, but you basically showed very conclusively in one or two videos that the evidence that you were able to present and answer the basic who, what, where, when, why questions, just doing that over the course of 3 videos, you showed more than basically any of the official investigations of any of these cases have yielded, any news reports, anything. You've done more in 2 or 3 videos than they have.
It's not complicated.
Yeah.
You can see from my point of view, when I did it myself personally, that either law enforcement is completely incompetent and doesn't have any idea how to investigate anything, or they're ordered to not investigate and to stand down and to do nothing, to sit on your hands. You're a toothless German Shepherd. That dog don't hunt. And so to tell you the truth, I do believe they're incompetent. I do. But I also think that it's not their job to perform investigations of NATO military operations. So A, they're incompetent, and B, even if they were told to do it, they couldn't do it, but they're not told to investigate. They're told to not investigate. In the case of Aaron Valente, you're talking about a grand total of seven investigative agencies, 2 district attorney offices, 2 sheriff's departments, and then we have 3 municipal police cities. We have 2 counties and 2 district attorneys. We have 2 sheriffs, and we have 3 municipal police. And so the first question is, well, like who should be in charge of the death of this woman, age 33? I don't know. Where did she go missing? Menlo Park. Oh, so they should be in charge. Well, where was her dead body found? Almaden, City of San Jose, Santa Clara County. Oh, well, then you handle it because you found the dead body. But she could have been killed somewhere else and then deposited there. How would I know? So instead of actually working as a team, they just do this. Hey, that's you. It's and the way it works, people. If you were planning on murdering someone, I do recommend that once the person is dead, do dump the body into a different county over the county line. That's going to give you a minimum, of a 6-month head start, because the county sheriff from the department that found her is not going to communicate with their neighbor sheriff. They're not going to talk to them because they'll get credit to solve the case, even though they cannot solve the case if the murder and all the evidence of the murder happened in a different county. So if you separate those things, I know the police will not communicate with each other. So it's by design to fail. And if you look at the Zodiac killings, you have that. There were multiple counties and city police, and none of them spoke to each other. And they could have shared information. It wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered because military soldiers did all the murders. There was no Zodiac killer. There is no Zodiac killer. And if you see a Netflix film that tells you that Charlie Manson killed Sharon Tate, or that that David Berkowitz shot all these 15 people, it's not true. There is no way one person could do all of the events that are attributed to the lone nut crazy dude, Zodiac killer. One person can't do it. It's too complicated, and logistically, it's implausible. So it is very easy to do with a military team that the sheriff and the police are not authorized to go on to Travis Air Force Base, for example, because there's military bases all around where these killings are, whether it's Wright-Patterson Air Base in Ohio, or whether it's the Presidio Army Base in San Francisco, or whether it was Moffett Air Force Base in Palo Alto, Mountain View, Palo Alto, where Aaron Valente was last seen alive near Moffett Air Base. And it could happen in Solano County at Travis Air Force Base, or Yuba County at Beale Air Force Base. The sheriff and the police are not authorized to get on those NATO bases. And that's probably where the killers, slept overnight. So they insulate any possibility to get the killers.
Indeed. And then what you find out when you start digging is that there is always some, to maybe more subtle in some cases than others, but there's always a thread that either connects the victims or where they went to, where they lived, or who they knew, or they were all dealing with those are the details that are always left out. And right. It's because the
victims are typically not killed where they have their residence. They're not killed at their home. They're killed in an area that they're not that familiar with, which is great because I can assure you that the killers are extremely intimately familiar with the killing box, the kill box. The killers know the kill box. The victims do not. This is all part of how to pacify and control your victim. So it's just easier to do it. And Josh, this is how it is. Then to make it confounding, the media immediately provides cover with the Mockingbird media program to introduce chaos or confusion that it's very complicated when it's not. It's not complicated. And they will give you the usual suspects. You'll notice the media with any so-called murder event, they will produce a scapegoat in the case of Lee Harvey Oswald. Walter Cronkite in the CBS Evening News presented Lee Harvey Oswald to the public within 90 minutes of the killing of the president. That's not unusual. They typically have a suspect already picked out, and the media is just lightning quick to give you his name and to demonize them. They immediately start demonizing him, like in the case of the Rob Reiner murder, which I still don't know the cause of death exactly. They quickly named Nick Reiner, the second of three children, as the most likely suspect. He was identified within 60 minutes and then confirmed within 5 hours or so.
And I said last night in my video, now we don't ever get access to pretty much any type of record. There's no records, no ability to access records, no nothing. And so that makes these
Well, if you're identifying murder suspects within 5 hours, then there's been no investigation.
Yeah.
So that means, who cares?
All right, let me read this really quick. I want to
Go
read
ahead.
it. A kill box. This is from the Devil's Dictionary. It is a multi-dimensional space into which targets are maneuvered in order for the overseers of that space to be able to eliminate or control such targets in some fashion. The dimensions of the kill box consist of 3D space, time, beliefs, values, resources, perception, and choice, while the dynamics which are used to induce people to enter the kill box space consist of propaganda, indoctrination, education, disinformation, misinformation, narratives, limited hangouts, ill-advised public health policies, uh, iatrogenic activities, misdiagnosis, pharmaceutical toxicities, politics, sanctions, legal processes, myths, threats, fear, desire, hope, force, as well as classical and operant forms of conditioning. Very important definition.
Yeah, when you understand that everything's very organized and that this organization structure for military, which is fighting battles, waging wars, fighting battles, going out on black operations at night, clandestine operations, Gladio, the army left behind, assassination teams, logistical teams, reconnaissance teams, surveillance teams, kill teams, laundry, weapon disposal, how to dispose of weapons so they'll never be ever accidentally introduced into a trial. You can introduce props not used in a murder. You are allowed to, under maritime law, you can put in props that resemble the weapon used, but you're never allowed to actually have the weapon that was used, right? Because it's professionally done away with. And you have the situation where then you understand how easy it is to do these crimes. The media's job is to make everything really complicated and confusing. And yet it's so complicated and confusing, and yet a lone nut did it. Or in the case of the Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, it was a 23-year-old guy who just was declined for service in the United States Army because he crashed his motorcycle and hurt his knee. Charlie Watson, he was rejected as a draft, being eligible at his selection, and that he shimmied up a telephone pole with wire cutters, which have never been found. I don't know where he got the wire cutters, and he cut 3 different wires to the telephone line and the electric cord to the gate. So the gate was disabled, the front gate to the property, so that people couldn't enter or leave. He disabled the gate, which is very professional, and he's injured. And he has 2 assistants. They're both 21-year-old little girls. One has a 9-month-old baby boy, and I guess she had to get a babysitter so she could go out and kill some people with knives that have never been found, which, by the way, could only be NATO bayonets. They were double-edged, razor-sharp, 7-inch long bayonets that would probably be attached to the AR-15 semi-automatic rifle, which there was a rifle or rifles like that on the property because we extracted 7 bullets for the AR-15 rifle. So we have AR-15 rifles in play. None were found. No bayonets were found. A buck knife was found. A buck knife. This is what a buck knife looks like. Okay. Was this weapon? Does it comport to the 103 stab wounds that were found on the 5 dead people? No, as a matter of fact, it doesn't. This weapon couldn't have made any of the 103 wounds. This weapon does not. So my question to Judge Older, Charles Older, it's another Charles Older, why did he allow a buck knife to be admitted into a murder trial when the buck knife was most definitely not used? There was no forensic information to prove that it was used. And you just see, because of kangaroo maritime law,
Judicial notice.
oh, we're going to convict these people. And it just looks scary to have wield a knife around in court, scare the jury.
So you mean judicial notice?
It just, yeah, it's judicial. It's not the weapon, but it's theater and it's scary. So look, they're wearing slut dresses. So those girls must have done it. They're in micro mini dresses. So obviously they should go to the gas chamber on that basis, based on their wardrobe, provided by Vogue magazine and Joan Didion, by the way.
Yeah, these are all control points. These all allow for different dynamics to play out. And I mean, it's very crafty, some of the different techniques that are used. In a lot of the cases, what I'll notice is all of the people who end up targeted or dead, those people generally are owned by somebody. Generally, they all are owned by somebody. Somebody has given them everything that they have, either their job, position, their house, their drivers, their staff, and that is a control point because all of those things can be used to manipulate people. The way that it works in general intelligence is you find out what a person responds to. If somebody has this need, and they're a little bit different for everybody, what do people respond to? Once you find out what that is, and you then are able to manipulate how that need is fulfilled in such a way that you manipulate that person. That's how asset control generally works. There's always an asset manager too.
There's primary targets, and then there's tertiary or secondary and tertiary. So military has primary targets, secondary targets, and tertiary. Then they have, outside of that, they have what's called collateral damage, where people who are unintended and were not on the list of people to kill, wrong place, wrong time. And we had that in the Sharon Tate murder. We had Stephen Parent, age 18, who appeared on the property impromptu at the wrong time. He was there 11:30 p.m. That's really not the right time to be entering a kill box, cul-de-sac, dead end, when there's going to be 5 people killed in the next 45 minutes. And he left the property, approximately 12:15 before anyone was murdered. He was the first person to be murdered because when he approached the gate, he saw that it was disabled and you push the button and the gate doesn't move. So then he's approached by, men in the shadows with AR-15 rifles who tell him to halt and to get out of the car, whereupon he throws the car in reverse, crashes into the fence frantically on the perimeter. And there's photographs of the ranch style fence he hits with the bumper of his parents' car. Then he throws it back into drive and tries to make, a run at the gate because he's got to get some momentum to crash through. But they shoot him 4 times, very close succession in his chest and his arm. So he doesn't get to the gate. He never actually gets to the gate. They take him out. And you can only do that with semi-automatic rifles. And I'm going to say at least 2 men with 2 AR-15s did it. And then it's lights out for him. And that's that. And then they manually put the car in neutral and pushed it back behind the garbage cans, which is a curved area, so that when the paperboy comes, because they know the paper will be delivered for Saturday morning, the newspaper boy is going to drop off a paper, around 7 a.m., probably 6:45 to 7. And so they want to push the car around the garbage cans so the paperboy won't see that there's a car not in a parking spot, that it's, right there in front of the gate. So they pushed it away from the gate so that it's out of view. And the paper boy did deliver the paper, and the police interviewed him, and he said, "No, I didn't see anything unusual." So, that's very professional. You think two little 21-year-old hippie girls and a 23-year-old guy with a limp, Charlie Watson, you think they thought of that we better push the car back?
Well, this was what I was talking about before we started. What you find out is that all of these properties are probably known intimately because they keep moving all of these people into what seems to be managed housing or housing. It's, go
Yeah,
ahead
well,
and
this
tell us about that.
property was the home for Henry Fonda and Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda lived in the pool house, and Henry, her father, lived in the main house. One of the Philippe Rothschild daughters was an actress in Hollywood. She was assigned this house when she was working as an actress in Hollywood. Let's see who else lived in that house. Well, Cary Grant married, I don't know, his fifth or sixth wife. He married Diane. I forgot her name. Anyway, he married a 23-year-old young starlet from Portland, Oregon. And they went to Las Vegas to get married real quick, like bunny. Then they came back and spent a week at the Cielo Drive murder scene, a few years before the murder. And then they had CBS Records, Columbia Records, was promoting Paul Revere and the Raiders and their lead singer, who stood 6'6", Mark Lindsay. And they did an entire all-day photo shoot on the property with Mark Lindsay to create the illusion this was his home and that this is his swimming pool and that they have a red Ferrari that's parked in the garage. And they brought that out and they showed him in his Ferrari that this is his Ferrari and that this is the lifestyle of a successful Columbia Records pop artist, Paul Revere and the Raiders. But then 2 years later, they used that Ferrari as being owned by Roman Polanski, that this is his house. That's why the Ferrari is normally parked in that garage. Well, wait a minute. It was Mark Lindsay's Ferrari. Oh, wait a minute. It's CBS Television's Ferrari, and CBS Records owns that car. It's either CBS TV or Columbia Records.
But it's not just that one.
Not Roman Polanski's car.
That's not the only case of this happening either. There's dozens of other cases. So didn't you say that Rob Reiner's house was this as well?
Henry Fonda lived in Ron Ryder's house also.
Wow.
That's correct. So that's like community chest, right? And Ronald Reagan, the people who have had the most homes, based on my review, Ronald Reagan and Charlie Manson are sort of tied for first, giving the nod to Ronald Reagan. Remember, Charlie was only Charlie. The person who we call Charlie, his birth certificate name is no name Maddox. So there is no Manson and there really is no Charlie. But for the purposes of discussion, since we've all been indoctrinated into the Charlie Manson and the Manson family, which never existed except in your brain as a psychological fake story, the point that I'm trying to make is that Charlie was only out of prison for approximately 32 months, under 3 years. And so it's amazing. He lived in at least 14 different homes. And of the 14 homes, at least 7 of them today would be worth $10 to $20 million homes Charlie lived in. If you wanted to buy a home that he lived in, it was going to cost you minimum of $10 million. And in the home that Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, Charlie lived in his house, that's $18 million home.
We've discussed before how many different people pop up with the name Charles or Charlie.
It's lots.
And it means free man, means free man. And so, maybe one could.
Charlie is like a standard crisis actor, because it turns out the Charlie Manson character, his real name is not Charles. His real name is not. It's no name. But there is a Charlie Watson. There's a Charles Older, who was the judge of the Manson trial. And there's Charlie Kirk, right? And there's Charlie
Church.
And wasn't there Charlie Company that went in to kill 504 innocent civilians, mostly women, in the hamlets of My Lai? That was Charlie Company.
Was it?
Yeah, and that was in March 1968, a full 18 months before the Manson murders. We had Charlie Company performing 504 murders. Charlie Company. So before there was Charlie Manson, there was Charlie Company in Vietnam. Hello, are you paying attention?
So many are not. Well, paying attention. So you start noticing these patterns.
What
And
do
the
we call
first,
communists? Ununiformed Viet Cong. What do we call them? We call them Charlie. Charlie's
Charlie,
hiding it, right? Charlie, it's the enemy. Go ahead.
when you start to notice all of this, it almost you always have this thought. It's like, wow, this seems a little crazy, but I mean, then that would be a good way to hide. Like, for instance, I've heard a tactic. If you want to get away with, like, I don't know, it's like you mug somebody, just have everybody dress up as Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, just have people dress up in the wildest things. And then when, if somebody ever tries to say, oh, this happened to me, what, you telling me you got mugged by Mickey Mouse? Really? They're not going to believe it. And that's a tactic that can be used. And this
Absolutely.
is very much used.
Well, once you see, you and I were not, formally trained in military tactics. Don't you understand, this concept of surprise sneak attack? You can have a surprise sneak attack in the open.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to sneak up on your enemy. If you hire, like Michael Jackson would have a new record album, and they want to do a presentation on a red carpet or something, but it looks stupid on camera just to have him walking by himself. So what you want to do is have autograph seekers and a big crowd that you can pan the camera around to. Well, you hire them. They're in Hollywood. They have staffing companies, right? Just like they staff the Olympics for their, security guards. They have staffing companies for.
That's one of those gray space companies.
They'll hire, a rental crowd. You hire a crowd, and you can stipulate how you want the crowd, what kind of attire. You all wearing the Michael Jackson, T-shirts, or whatever film he's going to be in, like a Thriller. Should they wear Thriller jackets? With the V, the upside down pyramid is the jacket that Michael Jackson wore. He wore a pyramid. Like Amy Winehouse wore a pyramid tattoo on the back of her neck when she performed at the Glastonbury Musical Festival in the big tent, which is a pyramid tent. She performed under the tent with a tattoo of a pyramid on her back. Amy Winehouse. Well, Michael Jackson did too, okay, in the form of a leather jacket. So you have rental groups, and you can stipulate the wardrobe as needed, and you can simulate excitement where none existed in real life.
Well, you see these staffing companies; those are a great candidate for those black and gray longitude companies, because, for instance, let's say that this staffing company also works with the fusion centers. What do you know? Now they have data. They have data on people, and so that is why those private sector companies, which don't ever get mentioned, along with think tanks, they're very parallel, but they have a lot of power, because if you are able to staff or produce a crowd, which is, let's say that's a perfectly legitimate business, but what people don't know is who else you're doing business with. That's a big difference.
There's no transparency. There's no voluntary disclosure, which means you can, if it's going to involve felony crimes, then you've met the definition of conspiracy. And in the words of my dear friend, Dr. David Gregg of the Department of Energy, he would say, anything presented on television is a national event that's going to involve a crime, is going to be a conspiracy. He says 100%, because there's going to be a producer, a director, there's going to be casting. There's going to be casting of either the victims and or the witnesses, or the crowd, to create a simulated perception of reality. And there may be people who actually got killed. Absolutely. And buildings may actually be destroyed, like 9/11. But he said it's not necessary. You could do the whole thing in a studio too, right? I mean, what's the difference, right? If you're offended, by those commercials that come on late at night where I have all the dogs that need homes that are tied up with chains and in junkyards, and I feel so bad. They come on all the time. But it's like Sam Kinison did a bit in his show where they did world hunger, and they always show a little child who's starving and he's near a mud puddle, and they're saying, please send your money here. And Sam says, I get off work, late, from this. I get off at 1:00, and then I can't go to sleep right away because I'm all excited about doing comedy on stage. So I can't help but be affected by this. And I get my envelope and I start addressing it. And then I think to myself, well, wait a minute. They got a camera crew there with lighting, and there's a director off camera. Can't somebody give this kid a sandwich? I mean, they're all got sandwiches. And then I can just see it now. I can hear the director saying, no, feed him. It doesn't look right unless he's hungry. We're losing the light. We're losing the light. Come on, let's get that sad face.
So that made me think, it seems pertinent to bring up. I'm going to read this short little section. It talks about the two views of history, one being the accidental view, the other being conspiratorial view. So the accidental view is pretty simple. Things happen by chance. They're not planned before they happen. And then the other side being that they are planned before they happen. So I'll read. Let's see. Another who has offered the accidental view as the explanation of the major events of the world is Zbigniew Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter's national security advisor. He has written, history is much more than the product of chaos than of conspiracy. Increasingly, policymakers are overwhelmed by events and information. But there are those who disagree with the positions of Warburg and Brzezinski. One, for instance, was Franklin D. Roosevelt, who certainly saw many monumental events occur during his consecutive administrations. President Roosevelt has been quoted as saying, in politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, it was planned that way. If harmful events are planned, it follows that the people who were about to suffer through the scheduled event would act to prevent the event from occurring if they knew about it in advance. The people expect government to protect them from harmful events. But if the events still occur after the government officials have been expected to prevent them, the government officials have failed in their assigned duties. There are only two explanations as to why they have failed. One is that the evidence overwhelmed them and they could not have been prevented. Or two, the events were allowed to occur because the officials wanted them to occur. It is difficult for the casual observer to believe that these incredible events could not have been prevented, as humane people of conscience do not allow harmful events to occur. If a planned and unwanted event is allowed to happen, those who planned the event would have to have acted in secret so as to prevent discovery of their plans by those who would be adversely affected. Planners working in secret to plan an event that the people do not wish to occur are, by definition, members of a conspiracy. Webster's defines conspiracy as a combination of people working in secret for an evil or unlawful purpose. Not only must the conspirators work in secret, they must make every effort to ensure that their plans are not made public. The first task of a conspiracy then becomes that of convincing the people that the conspiracy itself does not exist. This makes the task of uncovering the machinations of the conspiracy all the more difficult.
Okay. What do you conclude by that, Josh?
Well, what we were kind of talking about, the question that a lot of people kind of naturally arrive at then would be, are these things happening by chance, or are these things happening on purpose? And that is kind of, as it says, normal people have a hard time shifting their mind into, I guess, that gear, because that's not the way that generally good people think. But that is why it is able to be exploited. That is the exploitation mechanism, because it is known that people don't think in that manner. And so they are able to kind of use that as a way to cover up these events, which, in my opinion, and I'm guessing your opinion, are happening absolutely manufactured.
Well, the architecture for doing this is the Hollywood or the entertainment industry,
Mhm.
where you have a producer. The producer has a banker who works with a budget. They work on if a producer wants to create a film or a Broadway play or a television series, you've got to think in terms of, well, how many actors do I need? How much are they going to cost? Are we going to do it in a sound studio, or are we going to go on location? That means hotels, it means travel.
Mhm.
Anyway, you try to find what type of entertainment vehicle that you want to do. Then you're going to have to go sit down with your banker and say, can you give me this much money? And they'll say, no, I'll give you half. Okay, well, then you got to go back to your conference room and you got to say, well, we got to do it local at the Paramount Pictures lot or the Warner Brothers lot. We can't go to Seattle or British Columbia. We got to do it here because we can't afford the hotel. So let's cut that out. You see, and then you arrive at what your finance will allow, and then you're going to cast your show. Now, we're saying that it's based on someone's book or a poem, like in the case of Deliverance, was based on a poem. The poet who wrote the poem became the county sheriff, who appears in the last scene where he tells the canoers, Burt Reynolds and John Voight, Ned Beatty, the three survivors. There were four canoers and one died and three survived. And he tells them, don't ever come back here again. I'd like to see this town die kind of peaceful like. See, it's the Tennessee Valley Authority is damming up the valleys, and this town where the canoe trip ended is all going to be under 200 feet of water in the next year. So the sheriff suspects that they murdered a hillbilly out there, and he weighted him down, and he's never going to be found. But he has no body, so he has no evidence that they did it. But he just says, just don't ever come back here again. Well, he was the person who wrote the poem, which was the basis for the screenwriters to create the script. Well, okay, you have that going on all in television and film in Hollywood, where they have people who created an idea and then end up doing a cameo. Alfred Hitchcock was another such person who was the director, but oftentimes appeared for 15 to 30 seconds in a non-speaking role in a film that he's directing. Okay. And then add the next link. How about we do all these war movies about World War II or the Korean War or the Vietnam War? And then we have actors like John Wayne and Ronald Reagan. Well, Ronald Reagan works for the United States Army, and he's an intelligence officer for Army Airborne, and he is contracted with Warner Brothers. So he is working as a military soldier and an actor. And he's doing education tutorial films for the military training films he's doing, as well as fictional battlefield movies. And so Ronald Reagan is really versatile. He is a military Army Airborne soldier, and he's an actor, and he's a tutorial, how do you do it, training video guy. Then he becomes the spokesperson for General Electric, which brings good things to life. Now, in the movie film Dr. Strangelove, which stars Peter Sellers, who plays three different characters, we have an example of a Hollywood actor who's also a United States Marine, and his name is Sterling Walter Hayden. He's born in 1916, and he began as sailing his boat in and around New Jersey and the East Coast, but then he moved on out to Hollywood in 1938. He's only 18 years old, and he starts working at Paramount Pictures at age 18. And, then he does his first Hollywood film called Virginia in 1941. But then of course, we have the World War II. World War II happens whilst he is entering Hollywood. And they created a fake name for him called John Hamilton. But his name is, I just told you, his name is Sterling Hayden, right? Well, he ends up becoming the Air Force General Ripper, who sends the B-52 nuclear bombing wing to attack Russia. Gives them the go code. And he's playing a mutually assured destruction military general who loses his marbles. And this is the Sterling Hayden character. But he's already received a Silver Star for gallantry in the United States Marines in the Balkans and in the Mediterranean. He is a decorated soldier who is now a Hollywood actor who is he's triggering the doomsday machine unwittingly, because he didn't know General Ripper didn't know there was a doomsday machine assuring
What was the name? I'll put the picture.
Okay, his name is Sterling Hayden, and there are many photographs of him, and before, during, and after. He died in Sausalito at age 70, which is close to this studio where I'm coming to you from. He is a fixture here in the San Francisco Bay Area, Sterling Hayden. And I find this ironic because my family sailboat was worked on in Sausalito with Myron Spalding, who undoubtedly, my friend Myron Spalding had to know Sterling Hayden. No one who lived in Sausalito who sailed boats, every person knew Myron Spalding. And I mean, there's no exceptions to that. And you know that Marin County is a huge military intelligence town and banking town. There are private bankers and military all over Mill Valley, Tiburon, Belvedere, Thomas Perkins. There are Vietnam Operation Gladio soldiers who are Vietnamese who live in Tiburon, who were brought here by the CIA. They're all over Sausalito, Mill Valley, Corte Madera, Tiburon, Belvedere, and there are Hollywood actors and comedians also, including Father Guido Cerducci. He lives in San Anselmo, not far from Sausalito and Sterling Hayden. Go ahead. Back to you, Josh.
Yeah, I was thinking kind of this came to mind as I had read a minute ago. It said the first thing in a conspiracy is to convince people that there is no conspiracy. And so it is important to remember anything that we are shown as the public is shown. That is precisely the effort being done to convince you of what they want you to believe. That what we're being shown is their attempt to convince the public that what's really going on is not going on.
Well, in the words of Inspector Clouseau, played there by Peter Sellers, facts, Urban Odyssey, facts. Without facts, your supposition is merely guesswork, but you must base your conclusions on facts. And it's a fact that Sterling Hayden was a United States Marine, and he was decorated. It's also a fact that F. Lee Bailey is a United States Marine. Tom Lang of the Los Angeles Police Department investigating the O.J. Simpson case, he's a Marine. Mark Furman, the guy who found the glove that says he denied using the N-word, he's a United States Marine, okay? The serial killers, Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, they're United States Marines. Fact. Oliver North and arms for hostages, drugs for arms, he's a United States Marine, okay? Daniel Ellsberg, who leaked the Pentagon Papers, he's a United States Marine. He went to Harvard for 6 years. Fact. He works for the Rand Corporation. Fact. He's a Marine. Fact. Sterling Hayden is a Marine. Fact. Lee Harvey Oswald, the scapegoat for John Kennedy, he's a Marine, a United States Marine. Okay, Frank Fiorini, also known as Frank Sturgis, he's a United States Marine. Fact. Fact. What do these facts tell us, Josh? They
That
tell
they're
us that
all
United States
taking orders.
Marines, they can appear in Hollywood movies like Sterling Hayden and also Ronald Reagan. He is United States Army, and he worked with the FBI and Army intelligence, and he became a fake governor of California
It,
and a fake president of the United States for 8 years, and he's United States Army.
well, to say it means that they take orders from somebody. Because if
Obviously,
you've been in the military, that's what you're trained to do.
we follow orders or people die. It's that simple.
Yeah, it really is a good articulation of. I mean, it actually comes off as hyperbole, but it's not hyperbole because that's pretty much a really good way to put it. As I
Same
told,
as a Jesuit, oath of obedience, number one,
yeah,
obedience, omerta, number two, and then poverty and chastity as 3 and 4, and then
they
this
have one more.
world mission. You mean like Agenda 2030? Yeah, I mean like that.
Yeah.
That you believe, you buy into that. Every single person who works at Harvard, MIT, Stanford, University of California, Georgetown, which is a Jesuit school, University of San Francisco, Jesuit school, Loyola Marymount, Jesuit school. They all have that oath of obedience and omerta and world mission, meaning that they all pimp and promote being tethered to the cloud, having polluted skies, terror swarm, mandatory inoculation and jabs, face masking, social distancing 6 feet, which is 33, stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And what I'm trying to tell you is that there are many actors in Hollywood who are military operatives, and you can find out it's not even a hidden secret. Then the ones that are not, they're in a military operation, whether they even know it or not. So you've commingled. You see, it's the perfect cover. You take military trained people and you put them with Hollywood clueless actors, and then it becomes difficult. This is what the Viet Cong were, right? They don't wear uniforms. This is Gladio. Gladio is the army left behind, and you can't figure it out because they don't wear army uniforms.
The interesting thing is, as you brought up, the Jesuit Ignatian spiritual exercises of Ignatius of Loyola are very much the we'll say modern basis for a lot of the military warrior monk kind of like we're going to die for the cause world mission, as you said. But also they had a lot to do in Hollywood back in the day with the codes of morality. They said they had to have certain moral things in the movies, and they weren't allowed to do certain things for a long time. The term that the Jesuit order uses is like a corpse, perinde ac cadaver, which means to be as a corpse in the hand of your superior. Absolute authority, obliteration of will, world mission, principle or foundations, unlimited liability. Like a soldier, a Jesuit must subordinate all personal desires and even self-preservation to the mission. The end justifies the means is a Jesuit slogan.
There's so many things that come to my mind when I hear you read this, but to be a great actor, a really great actor who can play something not himself, you have to have the death of your ego. Your ego must be obliterated.
Yes,
Then you can assume
ego death.
new identity, right? And we saw that with Inspector Clouseau, who had 4 different aliases: a balloon salesman, a painter salesperson. Then he was a hunter of crows in the fields. And then he was at a nudist colony with no clothes on. So he was a nudist. And then he was a policeman with a badge and a uniform. So that's 5 different personalities. You know that Peter Sellers is a great actor because in Dr. Strangelove, he plays a Royal Air Force officer who tries to talk General Ripper, off the ledge unsuccessfully. And then he plays the president of the fake United States. And then he plays Dr. Strangelove, who is a Nazi scientist who talks about underground bunkers, and that's how we're going to procreate, is underground, and then we're going to create a new civilization. We're going to come out from underground in 300 years from now when it's safe. And this is an actor playing 3 characters in one film, but he played 5 characters in A Shot in the Dark with Elke Summers. Peter Sellers played 5 different caricatures in that film. It's quite extraordinary. And the other thing is, it's called infiltration, not invasion. So when you put military trained soldiers next to, studio actor trained or acting academy or Royal Acting Academy trained, it becomes indistinguishable by who went to what school. They don't wear a sign that says, "Hey, I'm an officer in the intelligence committee." Timothy Leary didn't walk around saying, "I went to West Point. I was an officer cadet at West Point." Everyone always thought he was like a mature hippie, but he went to West Point and he was an officer at West Point. So was General Patton and Dwight Eisenhower and Douglas MacArthur. That's the same training that Timothy Leary had. Doug MacArthur training. Go ahead, Josh.
The topic that you brought up, it's called an ego death, and is very important because once you have an ego death, or a death of your ego, what happens is that the person you were before actually dies, but you're still here. And so you have died, and you find out that you're still alive. And the reason that's the case is because you can't see things the same way anymore. The person you were before this can't exist anymore because that person didn't have the ability to see. And now, after the death, after the ego death, you can see an extra layer parallel to reality. And that is what it means, eyes wide shut or one eye blind. That's what that means, is that is a type of infliction, actually, because you can't go back. Even if you want to, you can't go back.
It's called, in my world, you cannot unsee something that's really that dramatic. You'll never forget.
Mm-hmm. I'll read this. This says, an ego death or ego dissolution is a profound psychological and spiritual experience where one's sense of self, personal identity, and separation from the world temporarily or permanently dissolves, often feeling like a loss of I. It's described as merging with everything, leading to feelings of interconnectedness or a vast void, and can be induced by psychedelics, intense meditation, spiritual practices such as Buddhist or Sufi traditions, or traumatic events, sometimes resulting in deep transformation, but also disorientation or fear.
Yes. And, the church that was mostly established and there a long time in Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco, was St. Ignatius de Loyola. That parish is just walking distance. Abigail Folger's mother was a member of that parish, and she's also an important person in Haight-Ashbury. She's a senior person. She was in her late 50s, early 60s when she was working in Haight-Ashbury Project, HAP, Haight-Ashbury Project. It's a military project, and Abigail's mother's working there. But don't feel bad. So was Sharon Tate's father, Colonel Paul Tate. He's working there too, with Timothy Leary, who's in the United States Army from West Point. And you know who else is there? Hunter S. Thompson. He's United States Air Force. They know who else is there too? Louis Jolyon West. He's United States Air Force and a medical psychiatrist. He's there too. So you see, you had in Haight-Ashbury Project, you had a civilian in the form of Eunice Mejia, the mother of Abigail Folger, who gets killed in Benedict Canyon. She's not in the military, but her parents are State Department ambassadors to San Salvador. So she's in the State Department, which is military intelligence facilities in Central America. And then she's married to Peter Folger, who's in the importation of coffee beans from Central America, Honduras, Costa Rica, Colombia. And you know that it's not just coffee beans on those containers. They can put cocaine and they can put heroin and other products in the containers. And if you have a special sticker that your State Department approved because you married Ines Mejia, then no one's ever going to look in that container. And hell, you could do child trafficking operations, using containers if you wanted to. And so the point is, you have port facility transport going on in the form of Peter Folger, and he sold to Procter and Gamble. So now it's Procter and Gamble at the time of the murder of Abigail. But you have port facilities, you have port authority, you have transportation, import, export going on in the form of Abigail Folger's mother and her grandparents, and she's working alongside Colonel Paul Tate of the United States Army and Timothy Leary, United States Army, and Hunter S. Thompson, United States Air Force, and Louis Jolion West, MK Ultra, psychiatrist, United States Air Force. So she's enveloped by military trained, indoctrinated soldiers in San Francisco and 2 blocks from St. Ignatius de Loyola Catholic Church.
I was going to say the Catholic Church, especially just for the sole fact of the matter that they've been around for so long and that they have so much property around the world, that makes them a great group of people to run the surveillance, to run the cover, to get information around, to provide passage. And that made me think of the flaming heart pierced by the bayonet and the roses. Because we had talked about that in, I think, the first show that we did, and I was curious to understand the symbol.
The order of the Immaculate Heart is the people who own the property 100 feet from where Rosemary was stabbed 41 times, many times in her chest and through her heart. And the Catholic Order, which is not even hardly a baseball throw away. I mean, it's the width of a driveway, is the buildings owned by the Catholic Church under the Immaculate Heart Order. It's owned by the Catholic Church. Their icon is a military bayonet stabbed through the Virgin Mary's heart. Doesn't seem very appropriate, but I'm just telling you, that's how it is. That's how it went down. And there's a woman that got stabbed to death basically right off the property of the Immaculate Heart Order. Katy Perry wanted to put in a bid to buy that property. It didn't work out, but I'm sure Katy wouldn't want to buy that property. But anyway, that was a story when she was getting divorced from Russell Brand, an unfunny comedian with lots of tattoos, including the number 33 on his arm.
And it sums up pretty much everything that's kind of we're talking about. It is that idea of dying for a cause or suffering for love, something that you love. You're to suffer for it. Sorrow and maternal pain, core representation of sorrow. Ritual and oath penalty. The knife or dagger relates directly to highly binding and punitive initiations, Jesuit oaths, Masonic punishment, ritual cursing, and being wounded by your friends. That's another key symbol behind that.
Well, all I'm saying is any kind of explosion of a building, any kind of murder of an individual or a group of people, the media always has, Mockingbird media, military media, they always have hundreds of potential scapegoats. And the scapegoats are what we call the usual suspects. You round up the usual suspects. But when I personally looked at the Sharon Tate and Abigail Folger and Leno murders, I don't think of it that way. I think in terms of what would a detective do was actually trying to find out what happened. And I wouldn't round up the usual suspects. I would go after who lived next door, who were the bankers. Did these people have banks? The answer is always, yeah, they have a bank. Well, who are the bankers? Do they work in Hollywood? Well, who's their A&R rep? Who's their agent? What studios are they contracted with? I want to talk to those people. Who are their cohorts? Who last saw the victims alive? I want to interview them. And I'd like to give lie detector tests for everyone who was in close proximity to where these people lived or saw them on a regular basis. And I want to look at their bank statements. Now, maybe I can't get a subpoena to do that, but you know what? I'm interested in money laundering sources and uses of money. And I don't necessarily think that the killers are going to be in the group of people that I would be interviewing. But it's a great foundation piece to understand that the whole architecture is already there. Once you know that the thing's already set up, you can identify the pillars of the kill box and you can identify the reconnaissance houses fairly quickly in your investigation. And I did that with the Aaron Valente case. I did that with the Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, Lena LaBianca case. I did it with the Victor Oda case. And of course, I did it with the John F. Kennedy murder case. And I'm here to tell you that there are dozens of very easy to find witnesses who are material, who are persons of interest, who you could give a polygraph to, that you would learn enormous information about why the murder happened here. You may not know the killer. The killer's been flown out and is probably in Italy or France or some other country, Latin America, wherever. They're gone. But you can find out who were the team of reconnaissance and transportation logistical people. And in the case of Jack Kennedy, I identified dozens of people who the Warren Commission never caught. They never called. There's two ways to cover up when you have an investigation. Number one, you exclude witnesses who have stories. They do that in the O.J. Simpson case. They do that in the Sharon Tate case. There are people who actually are in the know who are never interviewed by police, never. And they're never called as witnesses at the trial. So then the other way you do it is you do call witnesses, and then you never ask them a direct question that everybody in the audience and the jury pool, they want this question asked, but they never ask it. They never ask it. So in other words, you conceal the answer by concealing the question that gives rise to the answer.
I was going to say last night, the audience that I was had on the stream were happy with the work that you were doing, because I think it's very clear, and this is a strong point to be made, is that when somebody like you, who has all of these facts and are able to piece them together, and I know you've been at it for a while, but just to piece these together, and for the most part, they go together well. Like, you're not jumping to conclusions, and it forces a person to say, wait, if this guy is able to do this so easily, and it's not just one case, there's a bunch of these.
And I'm not getting a paycheck. No one's paying me to do it.
That's another point, but it's like,
why don't you give me a couple $1 million? Watch what I do then. Because
right.
I'll go. I will bring my photographer and we will visit these scenes and we will document it and do a video. But I can't look. If I had the money, I would do that for sure. I know. I've been to all these crime scenes, almost all of them, and but I would love to go back with professional photographer and audio and do a more comprehensive job, more professional job than me just sitting in the studio talking. And pictures tell a story.
It's painfully obvious, and it was to me too when I first listened to maybe 3 or 4 of your videos, and I was like, how is it that this guy is seemingly doing a better job than the cops, than the detectives, than the FBI? How is that possible? And it goes to confirm that point pretty like all the way through. I mean, it's hard to dispute.
Yeah. Well, one, they know that they're not going to go very far with their investigation. You do look at the first crime report and the second crime report by the Los Angeles police detectives for the Sharon Tate and Lena LaBianca. They have report 1 and 2, and they did do a decent job. They did. But what cracks me up is that then they find Ray Norwood, who's the controller of Gateway Markets. You could solve the whole case if you just focus on him. Build a campfire around his house. You can solve the whole case. And they completely backed off from him. I mean, he's the most important person. I mean, you actually did talk to him. Did you give him a polygraph? No. Why not? You should give him a polygraph because he's lying. He's lying. He's concealing information. Did you give Peter DeSantis a polygraph? Yeah, they did. They did.
Did they really? Wow.
It's kind of inconclusive. He's an important person. He's very important. But you know what? Somebody called in just like they did with Ed Durston, who's in the kitchen baking cookies with Diane Linklater when she gets Superwoman thrown off her balcony face first into the sidewalk, dead at age 20, baking cookies on a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. How many 20-year-old girls baking cookies on a Saturday morning do a swan dive off their balcony with a 27-year-old adult man sitting there watching it happen? He took 2 exams. He flunked both of them. He flunked both his exams.
Wow.
Okay. And they just dropped it. The DA said, we're not going to charge him. Move on. Well, they did that with Peter DeSantis, and they did that with Peter Smaldino. They should have given Peter DeSantis a second polygraph because it was inconclusive. And, he probably would have flunked. But the thing is that he knows. He knows who killed Lino. He knows. He doesn't know the exact person, but he knows the organizations that would have been involved. And look, I identified the banks, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. It was Crocker. It was called Crocker Bank. And then now it's Wells Fargo, Hollywood National Bank. And I'll just tell you, Hollywood National Bank, Golden State Bank, Bank of America, Lincoln Heights branch. And then in San Diego, he's got another account down there at Ocean Beach branch, San Diego, Bank of America. And we got the Atwater branch of Crocker, which is now Wells Fargo. That's near Hollywood, in and around Paramount Pictures. So you see, he has 5 banks. Then he has 3 different silver coin dealers that he works with, which includes the Secret Service, which is the same people that brought you the John Kennedy assassination. They did a really crackerjack job of protecting John Kennedy, didn't they? The Secret Service?
Sure.
William Gere and Roy Kellerman and Clint Hill. Where was Clint Hill? He abandoned ship. He jumped off the bumper 2 blocks before Jackie had her husband's brain in her purse. Where's Clint? Oh, he fled. You did a hell of a job. Well, I got Lino's working with the Secret Service. They have a precious metals department for gold and silver items, and he's doing business with the Secret Service. Those are alternative banks. He has a safety deposit box at Bank of America in Hollywood, and he can put his silver coins and his bags of cash there because, see, he's working with the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Club in Venice Beach, and they are selling drugs, LSD, cocaine, heroin, and they're selling weapons, bayonets, knives, pistols, AR-15 rifles, ammo, and they're also in the identity theft business too. California driver's license, social security cards, and they sell those things in and around Hollywood and Los Angeles County, and they get the money. Then they got to give the money to Lino, who then puts it in with his grocery store receipts so that you'll never know how many tomatoes or bananas I sold or how much heroin I dealt.
Right.
And then I turn into silver coins and I go buy 11 racehorses and I hang out with Johnny Roselli at Santa Anita Racetrack near Pasadena and Alhambra. And he could have a secret hiding place with Johnny Roselli for his bags of cash money because he was buying a horse farm in San Diego County in Vista, which is 2 hours south. And that's why Lino LaBianca got whacked. That's why he got killed. He was quitting. He wanted to be in the horse racing business full time. He wanted to raise racehorses and train horses. And he was going to move 2 hours minimum distance, 2 hours away. And you cannot be an operative for military intelligence in Hollywood if from San Diego. We already have people in San Diego. You're here. This is your home. And you go, I'm out of here. I'm splitting. Oh, well, you're not living in the Disney mansion anymore, Mr. Smarty Pants. They moved him out of the Disney mansion and he gave them a big FU. And then they returned the favor. And they did lights out for him at age 44. That's what I'm saying. And then we, 4 months later, introduced the Manson family, which is living in CBS housing in a porn five houses, 3 swimming pools at 13158 Chandler Boulevard. And yes, that's a Masonic number. It's 1 mile from the CBS television studios where they did The Munsters and Mr. Ed the Talking Horse and My Favorite Martian. And literally, they could put actresses and porn stars with 3 swimming pools. And, that'd house 40 porn stars, 40 girls could be in that house. And they're babysat by Harold True and Phil Kaufman, who works for Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones part-time. When they go on the road, he's their road manager. But when he's not the road manager for the Rolling Stones, he's the babysitter of the Manson family and the porn girls, I'm sure he had no idea that those girls, that some of them would become Manson girls. He just thought they're all porn stars. And these are going to go here and these are going to go here. And you just make sure the girls don't go off the reservation. He's like, and they didn't have cars. The girls don't have cars and driver's licenses. They have to be shuttled around, right?
It's so painfully obvious these people are just all part of the same ecosystem. They are so much closer and connected behind the scenes, and everything that is shown to the public is designed to obscure mostly that fact.
So not only are the witnesses fake crisis actors, the scapegoats are typically fake crisis actors too. Sometimes they have legitimate jobs, like Lee Oswald. He's working at Jagger, Childs, Stouffville military spy pilot film development company in Dallas, making $8.50 an hour in 1963. And they gave him $5,000 of listening devices, which is not camera equipment, it's listening devices. They gave him that as part of his compensation. Then they tell him, okay, you're going to leave here and we're going to have you drive a forklift on the 6th floor of the book depository for $1.50 per hour and no camera equipment and no listening devices. Are you crazy? So, they probably said, don't worry about it. We'll make it up to you. And you know how long he was working at the school book depository before, Jack Kennedy was murdered? It was 2 weeks. He was there 2 weeks. It was a just-in-time scapegoat. And that's what they do for Michael Jackson and Katy Perry and Taylor Swift, is that they'll hire, you pick up the phone, you call the staffing company, and then you say, well, what age did you want? What costumes do you want? Do you have a T-shirt you want them to wear? Okay, what time did you want us to deliver them? And they'll drive buses over. And that's what they did with the Manson girls and the porn girls, is they have little shuttle buses. And they're like, oh, we're going to do a photo op at the Spawn Ranch where we're going to make it look like the Manson family lives at the Spawn Ranch. When I just told you they live on Chandler Boulevard, that's 15-mile distance from the Spawn Ranch. So when they say they lived at the Spawn Ranch, let me correct that. Different city, different part of San Fernando Valley, 15 miles to the east. So if they're living 15 miles to the east, they cannot be living on the Santa Susana Research Laboratory. You do know the Spawn Ranch is on a military 2,700-acre military weapon research facility, right? Box Canyon and Spawn Ranch and Iverson Ranch are part of a military base controlled by Boeing and Aerojet and Jet Propulsion Laboratory and Caltech, which is their, bomb manufacturing, where Sidney Gottlieb got a PhD. That's where he went to school. For all I know, Sidney Gottlieb spent time blowing up bombs on the Spawn Ranch and Box Canyon. Back to you, Josh.
It's once you see it and you start to see all of these things just fall into place, and moreover the fact that either just so many layers of people are incompetent, and sure, some of those layers are, but I think there is a heavy dose of incompetence and a heavy dose of cover-up, and they play very nicely together. It's really good to...
It's a buffet for the public, the profane public that doesn't understand everything is a conspiracy. Everything is a conspiracy. So if you don't understand that, then, you're never going to figure anything out. You're never going to get it. You have to let go of law enforcement. If you want to solve a crime, look, I've had 5 bicycles stolen. Law enforcement has recovered 0 of them. I had a car stolen. Law enforcement was informed, but it was a private citizen who called the junkyard, had it towed, and then I got a call. Then I got a call from the police department in Oakland. But the Oakland police didn't tag it. It was a private citizen that tagged the car. I mean, there were no wheels on it. The wheels were removed. So, I mean, if you have a car in your neighborhood with no wheels, you know, you should have it removed. And so, but the police didn't do that. You know, but I did get the call from the police, like they did it, but they didn't do anything. So if you want to get your car back or your bicycle back or your motorcycle back, you're not going to use the police. Okay. You're going to have to take private initiative. And if you want to be saved from the biodigital convergence, your city mayor is not going to do it. Your city council is not going to do it. Your board of supervisors is not going to do it. Your air quality board is completely and utterly a criminal enterprise. Air quality boards, everyone on those boards should be arrested and put into a windowless jail cell for a minimum of 10 years and in solitary confinement, because they are, not only are they concealing the truth, they're promoting the lies, that they're actually diligently looking for ways to clean up our air. Our air has never been more toxic and polluted than it is today. Our weather is fake. Our meteorologist weather people, they should be arrested and put into cells. They're lying about our weather. There's no such thing as an atmospheric river. There's rainstorms, and some of them look like tornadoes and hurricanes and synthetic snowstorms. Back to you, Josh.
Yeah, that reminded me. I was, it's some of the stuff that people are seeing now is just like, what? Here, it's just clouds that look like waves. I'm going to put it up here for you.
Did you check your I sent you a image from Franklin the tortoise on your cell phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you see that?
I got it.
Maybe you could put that up.
The latest one?
Yeah, the latest one, because it depicts the situation that you and I find ourselves in through no fault of our own.
Yes, I got you.
And this is what we're trying to achieve with our channel here. This Matrix of Mendacity
Masterclass
is that we're dealing. We are sort of like Franklin the tortoise,
right?
And we're telling our stories. We're telling our stories. The storytelling with Urban Odyssey and Juxtaposition.
Boom! There you go.
Right, there you go. When you realize you've been lied to
most of your life. And he says, "My whole life is a lie."
My whole life is a lie.
It's true, and that is back to that topic of ego death, because that is an ego death. That realization in and of itself
let go
is an ego death. But then once you see it, that is the eyes wide shut or one eye blind, is having to live in the world that you know these things about, but like people are still asleep, and it's almost infuriating type of infliction.
Yeah, because they're still living in the Emerald City and the Wizard of Oz, and you and I had our doggy pull the curtain back, and we saw that there is no Wizard of Oz, that's a psychological operation. It exists only in your mind. And it's all about authoritarianism and fear-mongering using flying monkeys and a green-faced nun of the Sacred Heart Order who flies a broomstick around town and, is threatening people with her flying monkeys. And once you overcome the theater aspect of it, the absurdity of it all, then that entire construct is vaporized. It's completely vaporized. And the wizard is shown to be what he really is, Donald Trump. Donald Trump, Robert Kennedy Jr., the hologram known as Joe Biden, the cackling word salad cacophony of chaos, Kamala Harris. She's a complete, psychops. Rachel Madcow, Andrea Mitchell. Go down the list. Tucker Carlson, Stupider Peters, born on April Fool's Day, and his name spells stupider. And he's got tattoos over his body. He's a Screen Actors Guild actor, rapper. and that there is no Wizard of Oz and there is no news media. There's only Mockingbird theatrical. And I cannot remember to forget, and neither can you, Josh. We don't remember to forget. We don't forget. Once you see that the wizard is a little old man pulling the levers, you're not going to go back that he's got a big Moloch lion head blowing steam out the nostrils. That's a theatrical presentation. It's not real. It's a sim. It's a metaverse. It's a sim. As Erin Valente said to her mother, her last words spoken, it's all a game. It's a thought experiment. We're in the Matrix. I understand that. I completely agree with Erin Valente. She spoke those words at 10 p.m. Pacific time, October 7th, 2019. October 7th, 2019, Erin Valente said, it's all a game. It's a thought experiment. We're in the Matrix. And then clicked off. And that was it. Then 5 days later, we find her dead body with her back facing the house at a 6615 Bowes Lane address, which is 666, the mark of the beast. But her back was turned to it, which means you invert it to a 999 meta dead. She is 1 block from the corner of Diablo Way and Bowes Lane at the only home with solar panels on the roof and the only home with 5 bayonet NATO-shaped diamond holes in the sidewalk where you could plant a flower or a little tree. That was, there were 5. She had 5 next to her Nissan Murano rent-a-car. And of course, I'd want to round up all of the executives at Hertz Rent-A-Car to explain to me and to Aaron's father, Joseph, from Rochester, New York, how is it that I begged you to trace and track her rent-a-car for 5 days and you wouldn't do it? And it took a dog walker to call it into police that there's a dead body in a car at 6615 Bowes Lane. And it's a $55,000 car, brand new, and you can't find your own vehicle. And I know you have a GPS premium navigation system on that car, and you have at least 5 transponders on the frame joints of that car. But for some reason, you can't find my daughter who's dead in that car. So she's probably in a refrigerator and the car's parked in a garage. But anyway.
Well, as you said, the whole idea of once you see the wizard behind the curtain and you don't remember to forget, you said it's a simulation, a meta simulation. But we know that meta means dead in Hebrew. And
Right.
as I said, the old you does die.
All right. Well, that's good enough for today, I think, Josh. We know that there's always a pool of the usual scapegoats. The suspects are typically not who did it. The usual suspects. When I rounded up and identified my suspects in the Erin Valente case, they were mostly bankers. They were mostly private bankers. I have 24 very material people that interacted with Erin Valente. They were all part of her world, and her world had her button pushed on her, and she was murdered. Okay, she didn't die of a manic episode at 33 years old. Nobody dies of any age of a manic episode ever.
We didn't mention that today all the way, but that doesn't make sense.
Bianca has a strong fingerprint with banking. So does Abigail Folger. And they're all tied in with banking operations in Hollywood and in weapons and drugs. Yes. And those are all 100% military controlled events. So it would follow that their murder would be by the people who they worked for. In other words, they were killed by their employer. Erin was killed by her employers. Sharon Tate was killed by her employers. Abigail was killed by her employers. Leno was killed by his boss. Okay. And Jack Kennedy was killed by his controllers, his boss. I guess they weren't happy with his obedience or his emerita code. Maybe he's talking to his girlfriends too much and they just put his lights out, but they wanted to make a spectacle of it with a public execution because he was facing his firing squad. The killers who killed him were standing or kneeling on the railroad trestle in the same manner as a military firing squad. Back to you, Josh.
Yeah, I think that was a good expose of this series of topics, not one topic, but it's generally the idea that everything that is shown is just the facade, and the people that are never talked about are the people who, and I tend to agree with what you said, the employers being likely the most responsible people. That adds up, because usually when we investigate these are people who are higher status. Like, I mean, they have money, they're in a career, a good career, and so it does make sense that especially the people who are handling the money, the purse strings, would at least be good suspects to
Yeah, because a
bring
banker
in.
has to authorize it because these are professional, and so you're gonna pay. There's a paymaster to take care of all the operatives of the event.
Mhm.
In the case of Jack Kennedy, they call it the big event. So there's dozens of people that need to get a paycheck on that. So you're going to need to get a sit down with your banker who's going to say, yeah, it's okay to do it. And then there may be some special, they want some special symbolicness, right? Like do it in a pyramid, do it near an obelisk, like they did with Jack Kennedy, do it with these Masonic numbers, or park killer wherever, but then wait 5 days, then park the car in front of a 666 address, and have a dog walker find the car. So get it there like at 3 in the morning, and then the dog walker will probably find it between 7 and 9 a.m. And so that's what they did. In other words, every single aspect of the Sharon Tate murder, the Aaron Valente murder, the John Kennedy assassination, every single aspect of it, from body disposal, weapon disposal, means disposal, the operatives being flown out of town, never to be seen again. Everything was planned. That's a conspiracy. That's a conspiracy to murder or assassinate.
A lot of money on the line. Absolutely, absolutely. Any final thoughts before we close out? I think it was a great 10th
No,
episode, and here's to many more, man.
yes.
All right. Thank you
Forge
guys
ahead.
for tuning in. We appreciate it. We have enjoyed doing these episodes for you. Feel free to leave feedback, comments, questions, concerns. I'll answer them. Juxta will answer them if he sees them. And we will see you guys in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye.